Title of this broadcast is I Didn't Get What I Wanted. And this just kind of dropped in my heart here and been on what is it? Substack, not too long, but maybe a couple of months now. And as a executive coach, I work with high achieving men. And so I'll kind of give some shameless plugs for a complimentary webinar that I have taking place December the 9th. So in this conversation, I'll be mentioning that you know throughout the broadcast here. But I do want to talk to you about again the topic of this conversation is I didn't get what I wanted. And I could have made a subtitle, but I wanted to just not give it too much more thought and just go live because if I give it too much more thought, I probably wouldn't go live here. But a lot of times, this, again, this is even in line with the free webinar that I got going on, uncovering your core, your path from success to significance. That's taking place on the 9th of December. So this is actually in line with that. So it just kind of just dropped in my heart. So I wanted to talk about I didn't get what I wanted. And a lot of times in life and relationships, especially as high achieving men, and you may have heard me mention this before in a previous broadcast that I've done a Substack, is that the biggest culprit or the challenge that we as high achieving men are dealing with is uh, reaching the top of the summit and saying what next. And again, I got a webinar that's taking place December 9th, so I'll be giving some shameless plugs for that webinar that's taking place. Um, and any event, so when we reach the top of that summit, oftentimes the question for a lot of us as high achieving men is, what next? What next? Here, and it's interesting because I like to solve problems. And I think most of us as men, we like solving problems. We like being able to have answers. And if we don't know the answer, we find the answer, look for it. And at least that's how I am. I'm just one of those persons just kind of just press in and hone in, like, how do I figure this thing out? And so it just dawned on me. I said, a lot of times we as men, again, reaching the top of the summit, if you will, have acquired all kinds of different things, assets, bank account, financially, we're doing well for ourselves. And the one thing that we are challenged with is, amidst all the success, is feeling invisible. And it dawned on me one of the reasons why, and I'll talk more about this in this webinar that I got going on. Um, again, on December 9th, I'll share a lot more detail about that. But it dawned on me actually, as I was studying and just preparing for the webinar within a couple of days here, it dawned on me is that what happens is that in our family dynamics, our moms, our dads, and just the family dynamic, because you have the differences between men and women, and I'll try to put this polite and be direct as possible, but and just let you know what I'm about to share with you. It's not a woman hating thing, nor is it a man bashing conversation, but it is a truth that I have realized or I've recognized in my own life, and perhaps as a man, you may recognize this as well. But nevertheless, is that what I recognize or what I realize is that oftentimes, even in again from the family dynamics at the very fundamental level, a lot of us as men are not heard, hence why we feel invisible. And the fathers, we can only imagine what our fathers have gone through. And yet, eventually, it becomes the sons who are not heard, the offspring, the sons who feel like they're not heard. And what has a tendency to happen is that because we're as now at one point the sons even as sons we had no idea what our father may have been going through completely, obviously, because we're not our fathers. We're the offspring of our fathers. And so, but naturally, in most cases, we will repeat that process. We'll repeat those same steps. And again, a lot of times, the offspring as sons, we end up feeling invisible as well. And so, what happens is that we end up going after our careers because our careers are predictable to a degree. We go to school, we get such and such training, or we accomplish this and accomplish that. And hopefully and prayerfully, the door should be open, and voila. And again, that's a lot with our own effort. But what happens when you can't control? There are certain things that you can't control in relationship to that effort that we put in the place of our careers, and the relationships are quite different in a big way, because sometimes the effort, our own personal effort, it appears that it doesn't show up a lot of times. And here's what I discovered. I discovered a lot of times that, again, because of that, the dynamics between men and women, we're different in a lot of ways, not only physiological, but obviously, but mentally and emotionally, how we process things. And because we're processing things in such a major difference, again, there are different variables, obviously, but because we're processing these things so differently, what happens is that because women are more prone to be more emotional. Again, not saying that women can't be logical, but they're more prone to be more emotional than anything, and men more logical. Again, not to say that men can't be emotional, because they are at times, but nevertheless. So there are choices that each of us make throughout the course of our lives, within relationships, in or out of relationships, just life in general. But by and large, most of these decisions that we are making are, or have made, or had to make because of relationships. Again, relationships are just a major part of life, and it's just the way it is. And so, because we have uh, been influenced by the decisions that we've had to make, what happens is, a lot of times, is that for us as men making those decisions, we have had to hold ourselves accountable. We have had to hold ourselves accountable. Again, not saying that all men, but a good part of us as men, we hold ourselves accountable for the choices that we've made, good, bad, or indifferent. So, conversely, a lot of times with women, and this does not mean that it's 100% women all the time, but conversely with the women, they end up having an issue with holding themselves accountable because of the emotional burden that it places on them. Because, see, now, be it man or a woman, when we've made choices, these choices can be, especially the outcome, the results of the choices that we've made, they can be very, very heavy, and just to the point where they feel like you're soul crushing. We're disappointed in ourselves, and again, we're carrying this major burden, and to a degree where it may even cause depression. It may just cause us to just lash out at people, or just not even to the point where we don't even like ourselves because of the decisions that we've made, and feeling that, we wish someone would have told us. Again, it's just a host of different things that could have been in place, but they weren't. And so now we have to bear the burden of the choices that we've made, both men and women. And in doing so, what happens is that for us men, we have to face those choices. And a lot of times, again, it does not mean that they're not difficult, but we have to face those choices and continue going on to live life, to make it do what it does. We have to keep forging ahead. And so, in the midst of a lot of all of this, a lot of times we don't have time to process those emotions. And conversely, with women, a lot of times, because they are wired more emotional, when women go through the things that they go through, it is perhaps not necessarily any heavier or any lighter, but nevertheless, we women process the emotions differently. and for the woman to really uh, look at the results of her decision, it can be very crushing for a woman. Again, it's not to say that those things are not crushing for men, and they are in most cases very similar. But those are the things that we don't talk about. But they can be equally as crushing for us as men, the different decisions that we've made, and now we have to live with those decisions. But going back to the example is that now when a woman makes a decision or she's now having to deal with the results of the decisions that she's made, it's bone crushing for her. It's shame, it's guilt, it's depression, it's running away from it essentially. And for us, as a lot of us as men, we don't necessarily have that opportunity. We do now. Doesn't mean that we don't run away from our stuff. It could be drinking, it could be alcohol, it could be more women, it could be the anger as a result of the conflict that we're wrestling with from the decisions that we've made. So it's not to say that men don't go through certain things. We do, but it is a stark difference, majorly, that oftentimes with women going through the things that they've gone through, again, with the decisions that women have made, and as a result, or again, that pattern, those situations, those circumstances that they're now in because of the decisions that they've made, resulting from the decision that they've made, women deal with shame. They deal with guilt. And the onset of that guilt is, in most cases, depression or deciding to run away from that situation, not wanting to deal with relationships. And so here's where the challenge comes in. So what happens is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times us high achieving men, we're feeling invisible. And so when we are in relationships or pursuing those relationships, we are so accustomed as men to performing and being known for what we can do, what we can figure out. And the reality of it is that we're so much more than that. We are human beings, obviously, but to be heard makes us human. When we feel that people or our wives, our significant other, our partners, when we feel they listen to us, we're heard. That's what makes us human when we're heard. Conversely, for us as men, when we're not heard, it takes the humanity out of life. We can absolutely feel less human. We can feel disrespected. And now back to the women. The women, in most cases, are saying, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. Always wanting to be heard. Always wanting to be heard. Thanks for Alexi for joining. But oftentimes the women wanting to be heard, always wanting to be heard, and to the point where it truly makes it truly hey there, it truly makes it doesn't give space to the man to be. And a lot of times, because of the decisions women have made, again, the re the results of the decisions that they've made and dealing with the shame, dealing with the pain, the hurt, the guilt, the dissatisfaction now in life, because oftentimes those decisions, just not just women, but just sometimes those decisions that we've made in life, they're just a huge rippling effect. And that through that rippling effect, they have a tendency to affect so many areas of our lives. And because they affect so many areas of our lives, they show up in our relationships with our husband, with our wives. And this is people in general. Again, I'm talking about how women between men and women, how we process our pain. Title of this conversation is I didn't get what I wanted. And oftentimes because we did not get what we wanted from an emotional perspective, we can find ourselves disconnecting from all other areas in life. Maybe not all, but a good part of life, we can find ourselves unavailable. And at times, this being unavailable can absolutely spill over into our relationships with one another. It can spill over into our relationships on a professional level, also on a personal level. First and foremost, it spills over into our personal lives. And when it spills over into our personal lives, excuse me, when it spills over into our personal lives, it obviously at some point it will spill over into our professional lives. And so we can find out we can discover that that container that we have set aside for the personal things, it's no longer uh, personal things that's filling up that container because now the personal things are now enmeshed with our professional lives. We're talking about I didn't get what I wanted. And so what happens is that again when men between men and women when we're processing these things, men in most cases take it on the chin and we have to keep going because we're looking at the burden of all the other things that come in line with the choice that we made. And we cannot drop the ball. We cannot drop the ball. I'm not saying there are some men who just say, forget about it. I don't care. I'm going to drop this ball. I'm not saying. I'm speaking to the men who know who are pressed to press in and press through and knowing that I cannot drop this ball. Because if I drop this ball, there's so much more connected to this. And so now I have to push through. Conversely, with women, a lot of times, because they process things differently, they will drop the ball. Because so often society has given them permission to drop the ball. Now, as I stated earlier, this conversation is not about bashing women or bashing men. I love who I am as a man. I love my wife. I love life. But these are sometimes truths that we have to make the connection with so that we can fix them, so that we can make changes. And without, be it man or woman, holding ourselves accountable. You can't change what you're not willing to face. And this is any of us across the board. What we're unwilling to face or to manage, you can't change that. And so as a result, we end up taking this burden into other areas in our lives, and it absolutely can show up in our lives financially. Obviously, it shows up in a personal level as well. And because it shows up in a personal level, here's what happens. We can find ourselves not being available to our spouse emotionally or to our significant other. We can find ourselves not being available to the person in a relationship. And again, I get it. It's men or women. But here's the interesting thing about it. When a man chooses a woman, there's a scripture in the Bible that says a man that chooses a wife, a man that finds a wife, he finds a good thing and he finds favor with the Lord. I know there's a lot to that. And I don't want to get into that all of that right now, but when a man makes a choice, he makes a choice because he's looking from it from different angles. And again, there's some men who are making choices from a level of just a surface level. I get that. But ideally, when a man is making a choice, he's choosing a wife. He's choosing a woman who's not argumentative. He's choosing a woman who is and who can be a part of the plan, the bigger picture. Because ultimately, that's what this is. It's about creating a bigger picture, and that the that the results of our decisions together, a husband and wife, the results of two people making a decision, and the man choosing that wife, he's choosing that woman in most cases more like himself. So as a result of that man choosing that woman, he's choosing that woman the uh, based on in ways like himself, that she's a go-getter. She knows how to get things done. But at the same time, there are the key elements that he is looking at, that he doesn't want a woman who's argumentative. He wants a woman who's able to be a part of the plan. And we're working this thing out together. But what happens now, oftentimes when we don't get that, we get women, uh, as men, we get women who are emotionally not available because of previous relationships in most cases. Or if not the previous relationships, in a lot of ways, the previous relationships have something to do with it because I didn't get what I wanted. And we can picture a kid, or you picture a child that did not get what they wanted, the fit that they might go through, or a baby boy or a baby girl, or a daughter, your son, who did not get what they wanted. Picture that for a moment. The mayhem, the chaos that shows up in there at that very moment because they didn't get what they wanted. And as adults now, we may not act like that child. And just again, that emotionally, just emotions flying everywhere, anger flying everywhere because we didn't get what we wanted, or that child. We may not act like that child, but inwardly, as adults, obviously, we're going to deal with it differently. Hopefully, we're going to deal with it differently. But in most cases, we're like that child. I did not get what I wanted, so I shut myself off. I shut this part of myself off. And so now, when perhaps months, years later, in most cases, years later, we enter into a relationship, we can find ourselves emotionally unavailable because we did not get what we wanted way back then. Essentially, making a vow, be it spoken or not, be it verbal or nonverbal, just in our thoughts. Because I didn't get what I wanted, I'm going to act like this. I'm not going to give him what he wants. I'm not going to give her what she wants. Emotionally unavailable. You spoken a vow, again, whether it be verbally or non-verbally, just the thought, you're angry about something, and that anger is, in most cases, displaced. So when you enter into a new relationship with someone, that individual in most cases has nothing to do with what you didn't get back then in that previous relationship. Has nothing to do with it. But because we as individuals have spoken a vow, again, whether it be verbally or non-verbally, just a thought or thinking such a thought, we've set into motion the seed that begins to build a root system. And as it builds that root system, it doesn't only just affect your dealings with that individual, perhaps with mom or dad or with a previous relationship, it not only affects that person because you or I have spoken things again according to what we did not get verbally or non-verbally just by the thought. That root system begins to work itself, or the yeast begins to work itself through the entire lump of dough, and it's impossible to cut the yeast out, remove the yeast. It doesn't mean that we as human beings or people can't change, but we must recognize in the time of our dissatisfaction for whatever it may have been, we end up speaking things that are completely out of alignment with the end goal. And so our emotions begin to take over us. Our emotions are number one, especially in a way with women. And it doesn't mean that men don't have emotions because we obviously do. But what happens is, again, in he working with high achieving men, what happens is that the woman becomes unavailable emotional, be it a host of different things for why she may be unavailable. But ideally, it stems from I did not get what I wanted. And naturally, it can be that way as men too. There's such a burden that's placed on all of us in life, mothers, fathers. And because of that burden, life in itself can have us looking at a single lane. And in fact, it's a two-way lane. It's a going and coming. It's a entry and an exit. And life has to have a flow to it. The traffic has to continue flowing. The water has to have a current to it. Because if there's no current to it, at some point, the water or that puddle of water becomes stagnant. And when it becomes stagnant, at some point, because there's no flow to it, I'm not just saying the water flowing and going to a circle. No, it must go out. And as it goes out, that flow, it also must be prepared to receive. And oftentimes, because we as people can be emotionally unavailable, we cut off the flow. We prevent the receiving and the giving, if you will. We cut the paths off. Now this road is a one lane road. It's only going or it's only coming. Either way, there's no exchange. And so when we as people are emotionally unavailable, it's no wonder why we as men, and again, in a way that I'm working with high achieving men, it's no wonder that we are feeling invisible. It's no wonder why women are not being able to, or at least feel like they're not getting what they need.